Welcome to the Mistake-Free Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Marck Lautour, and I'm super excited today to welcome a good friend of mine, Dr. Andy Baber. Andy, welcome, mate.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Glad to be here.
So, big question right off the bat. What does it mean to be free?
Well, wow, you start with the hard ones here, Mark. Freedom's there's layers to it. This is a real estate podcast. We talk about financial freedom, and that's certainly one of the levels that I think most of us are looking to achieve in our lives, to have that ability to, spend our days and hours doing the things that are most meaningful to us with the people that mean the most to us, and so there's that financial freedom aspect of it. But, the other layers to that are health and time and, significance. So it gets, it builds, I think they build upon each other, right? So you start achieving some financial freedom, and then you can add those other layers in. But it's not an either or thing too. I think sometimes, there's too much delayed gratification in this process, and you have to be building those freedoms simultaneously.
COVID-19 has brought about some unique revelations in our business, right? It's really made you think. How has this impacted your business? And back up a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about, who you are, what you do, and then how has COVID-19 impacted your business operation?
Yeah. So, I live in Arkansas, in Northwest Arkansas, and I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. So I've been in practice here since 2008. And so, it's a specialty branch of dentistry. We do surgery only, wisdom teeth, dental implants, facial and jaw surgery. And so in a group practice here in Rogers with a couple of other guys, and it's been a really good professional situation up until, and it still is, but, sort of like we saw it coming kind of beginning of March, started realizing like, this could actually be pretty bad, and we may have to close our office. And then sure enough, middle of March, it was like they dropped the hammer, and we had to shut our doors basically. I mean, we were seeing some emergency patients, but the income of the practice basically stopped overnight. And so, we had to go through the process of laying off basically all of our employees, and going into crisis management mode, figuring out how we're going to weather this storm, which fortunately we were able to do pretty well. And then have been able to open back up and kind of start back.
Has that made you appreciate your talent level, Andy, and reassess, the importance of who's on your team at the office?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it was kind of like a blessing and a curse. Obviously, I wouldn't wish this situation on anybody. We are sort of ubiquitous in our society. All of us are being affected in some level. But on the other hand, it was an opportunity to reevaluate and reassess business operations and team and culture, and so there's been some positive changes, I think, that are going to come out of it in terms of us refining what we do and how we do it and who we do it with. And so we've definitely made some moves here. There's some people that didn't feel comfortable coming back. There were some team members that just things probably weren't exactly perfect with beforehand, and decided to make some changes there. And so I think in the end it's going to wind up being good for our business, but it's a painful way to go through it.
For sure. Who was your support system through this time period outside of your immediate family? Who did you reach out to find wisdom when things were getting a little bit crazy?
Yeah, well, certainly my partners and I within the practice kind of leaned on each other heavily, and we're usually a good balance for each other with different ideas. But then beyond that, I have a a network of now close friends who I've met through a mastermind group, specifically mostly for dentists or professional practice owners that I've been involved with, and that's how we met over the last 3 years. And so, I've really developed a group of guys and gals that I trust, who I meet with regularly, multiple times a year in person, at least up until recently. And then we get together on calls almost on a weekly basis so that we can stay plugged into each other's lives and, be a resource for each other to help us get through this kind of stuff. So that's been a huge thing, to have that support there. And then the network that comes with the mastermind group has just been invaluable.
Yeah. So to Andy's point, we met in one of these mastermind groups, and it's helped obviously us both. And that's the best thing about these mastermind groups, is that you meet like-minded individuals and you learn from them and grow from them. Tell me a little bit about your mindset with regard to the stock market and real estate investing. Are they mutually exclusive? Do you do them both? What is your take on how these downturns and upticks in the economy affect these contrasting ways to invest retirement dollars?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily there's a right or wrong, a cookie cutter situation, but for me, um, I'm pretty much completely out of the market, but for a very small percentage of my wealth, which is kind of tied up there within the context of a state retirement plan that comes along with my participation with Medicaid. So there's not a lot I can do there, but everything else, I transitioned a few years ago out of the stock market and more into the primarily real estate, but other alternative investment worlds as well. And the reason I did that is because after about 10 years in practice, it was starting to become clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to do this job forever. Oral surgery and dentistry is a physical job. It's harder on the body than I think people realize, and it's stressful and it's highly rewarding. But it's the kind of job that I could see that I wasn't going to want to practice at the same pace, into my 50s and 60s. And so I started trying to evaluate, well, how am I going to be able to, have my cake and eat it too here, in terms of maintaining the lifestyle that I want to with my family. And it just became apparent that stock market investing wasn't going to be the avenue to do that. It's just the predictability of it was not going to allow for that. And so then, my mind started working towards, well, how else can I create passive income in my world that's predictable and dependable, and scalable, and, allow me to achieve my goals and start gaining a greater level of freedom. And so I started having those thoughts and started turning some of that into action probably 5 years ago. But it took me a little while there were some starts and stops, and there was a few little, fortunately there weren't any experiences where I got totally burned, but there was definitely a few, pain in the neck situations and, investments that I got into that in hindsight were ill-advised. And so that's where the mastermind group has kind of come in super handy in terms of the educational component, and then the relationships with the people that, do this professionally, that allow a practice owner like myself to continue doing my day job, which is where I'm most productive for the time being, but then partner with people and joint venture in such a way to make it predictable and less hassle.
So take me back to that first time where you were able to take that. Was there a tipping point? Was there, you've kind of talked about your decision making, but was there something that finally triggered? Was it a discussion between you and Suzanne that said, hey, I'm going to do this? When you bought your first piece of real estate?
It was more like a gradual uh, realization. And fortunately, my wife Suzanne has always been super supportive, and basically it's been like, man, babe, whatever you want to do is fine. She's been very hands off in that regard, and so I kind of had been looking for some opportunity, and then a friend of a friend, oh yeah, let's build a spec house, and if one's good, then two's better, right? And so it's like, oh, this guy's a new builder. He's not super experienced, but his dad's been doing this forever and is kind of taking him under his wing. And and then so the project that was supposed to take 90 days took like 9 months. And I didn't lose my shirt, but I sure didn't make any money, and it was a drain and a hassle. And those are the kinds of experiences that could easily lead to some discouragement. But fortunately, around about the time that was all wrapping up, I kind of discovered our mastermind group and realized that there was a better way, So
let's
that's
talk about that. Let's talk about how easy is it for you now to identify, as a dentist, a practicing surgeon, how easy is it for you to identify a property and buy that asset? Explain to someone who's never done it before, thinking there must be a huge hassle. How easy is that process?
it's easier than you would think. And I think it does certainly take a certain level of investment of time and education to try to understand what you're getting into, and investment in the development of relationships of who you're getting into it with. But at this stage of the game, after I've been at this for 3 or 4 years, I have a certain level of sophistication, which is not anything great, but I just understand kind of my parameters of what I'm looking for, and I've got enough experience with what's worked thus far and who I've worked with thus far that when opportunities come, I'm able to evaluate them through that lens and pretty quickly, make a determination of whether or not something's right for me or not. And then it just becomes a matter of, do I have the capital to invest, and does this fit within the framework of what I'm trying to currently accomplish in terms of building cash flow or growth or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. So it becomes easier the more you do it.
Like anything, right? I mean, I think that's the profound statement, is that having goals and having a lens to analyze deal flow through. You don't know if an 8% yield with a 17% cash on cash return is a good investment until you've realized that there are far worse investments out there, and that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
solid. People just but at the same time frame, if that was a property that was maybe in the inner city in a really bad zip code, and then maybe those numbers you want to run away from, because you don't
Right.
want the hassle of the vacancy and the maintenance. And so, yeah, to have an understanding, and I'm sure your learning curve was accelerated by joining that mastermind group, Freedom Founders, that we're a part of, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think it really would have been possible. Um, I guess maybe it would have been possible, but it just accelerated the speed to goal. Just becomes so much more accelerated when you have that educational context, and then a group of trusted people that you have the opportunity to partner with and do deals with.
And I think that for me, books are a way to gain knowledge of concepts and conceptually wrap my head around what's possible. But I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. But I feel like it doesn't obviously get you there, right? Like it gets
Yeah.
you to the doorstep of, hey, this is a possibility. But actually doing a deal, you can't do a deal in a book. You have to actually invest your time and effort, which is probably why fewer people are doing this than should be.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, you can read a million books and get a really good conceptual understanding of what you're dealing with. But at the end of the day, when you got to sign the check, um, a lot of it comes down to, that specific deal you're dealing with and specific people you're dealing with. And then for those of us who have busy day jobs who aren't able to, devote our the entirety of our professional world to this, it becomes even harder because now you're trying to do it on the side. And so that's where the relationship uh, part of this becomes really almost the most important thing.
The collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can't, you know, it's not a good use of my time to go out and try to find a rental house in Rogers, Arkansas, and then try to property manage that, or find a deal and then manage a fix up of that property to get it rent ready, and then do the property management and all that stuff. That's not a good use of my time. I'm much more valuable doing surgery. And so if I can find people like you that do that at a very high level, um, as your full-time gig, and then we can partner together, then that's a much more efficient way for me to reach my goals of passive income, and do it with a heck of a lot less headache,
Yeah.
you know?
So for someone who's never heard of a turnkey operator or a turnkey investment before, do your best job of explaining what the heck is a turnkey property.
Yeah, so a turnkey property is basically a rental property, typically a single family home that is ready to go. It's turnkey. So for an investor like myself, typically I would partner with a turnkey provider, such as yourself, who is someone that goes out and acquires the property, typically at a discount, because you have the um, channels in place in your business to do that, and then puts the property through some sort of rehab to get it fixed up and nice so that people would want to live there. And these are typically properties, hopefully, in decent neighborhoods, places where people would want to live. And then you go ahead and get it rented and have a tenant in there and have it performing. And then it's sold to an investor such as myself. And then ideally, what you want is someone who's providing that turnkey property to also be handling the property management on the back end, because then the interests of the investor and the turnkey provider are mutually aligned, right? Because the property management, as you know, and anybody who's been involved with rental property can tell you, is the hard part, uh, in terms of making the asset perform. And so if you don't have that, if the guy who's providing you the turnkey property then hands it off to a separate property management company, I'm not saying that can't work out, but
But
you
buyer
know,
beware.
yeah, that's a little bit of a red flag, because then the guy that you bought the property from is gone. He's on to his next deal, and he doesn't have any continued skin in the game. And so that's why I think it's important to have the kind of arrangement that we have, where, you're providing these turnkey properties to me as the investor, but then you're also backing them up with grade A property management along the way.
No, super, super wise talking about the property management. It's a good segue. But to delve in, that would be one of your triggers, or, check the boxes. If you were looking for a new turnkey provider, is make sure that the guy who's selling you the asset, that is the guy that did the remodel and the one that's actually going to maintain the property
Hmm.
management on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the two big killers of cash flow in residential single family rental properties are vacancy and maintenance, and both of those are, so the maintenance, a lot of that's dependent upon a good quality rehab that's done on the front end, and then the vacancy has to do with just good ongoing property management. So if the guy doesn't do a good rehab, if he's managing your property, then he's the one that's going to have to deal with all those calls. And so it's in your best interest as a property manager to make sure that your rehabs are done at a high level, because every call you're getting in the property management side of things is one more thing you got to deal with. And so your most efficient way to make money at property management, presumably, is having the fewest numbers of calls and dealing with the fewest number of people possible. Uh, and so that's incumbent upon doing a good rehab job, and then getting the right people in the property, screening them on the front end and making sure they're good tenants.
You're 100% correct, but the scary reality is actually the opposite, that some of these property management companies out there, Andy, are actually the ones that don't actually have a full turnkey operation and are just, managing for other people. They actually make a ton of money on the maintenance markup. And so what they're doing, and we don't mark up our maintenance at all. So it's a little different for us because
Yeah.
we've
Different
obviously
model.
full different model. But that's another danger, is if you don't have the property management team being the guys that sold you the asset, then their main source of revenue, they may even discount their management fee from 10% down to like 7%, because they're just trying to get your business. And then the more maintenance, the better,
Yeah.
because they're like, hey, anything we do, we're going to knock on 25%.
That's right.
And if we do $500,000 worth of maintenance every year, then that sounds a lot like 125 grand we've just made.
Yeah, it sure does. And so then it becomes a vested interest for your houses to have more maintenance problems. Yeah. And so I had that experience with another turnkey provider, where I had a couple of houses and it just seemed like every month there was something going wrong. And, they were out there nickel and diming me and a toilet handle broke, and it was like a $75 repair. And I was like, good grief, this is literally a $3 part at Home Depot, you know? So that's the kind of stuff you can get into. And that's where the alignment of interests between investor and property manager and turnkey provider, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and love your two. I'm 100% alignment. The two big killers of cash flow. That's a big takeaway for anyone listening. Vacancy and maintenance. If you can eliminate both, you will never go wrong. That is your mistake-free real estate model right there. No vacancy and no maintenance. It's hard to go wrong.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about more about property management. How has SBD done in that regard, and how easy is it for you? How much time and effort do you have to put into kind of quote unquote managing your portfolio? Do you get calls? Do they handle things? Tell a little bit about your experience here at SBD.
Yeah, overwhelmingly positive and low hassle and very minimal time that I have to put into it. I mean, typically on a normal month, I'm just basically, I notice when the check hits the bank, and I log on to my web portal and pull down the reports, the monthly reports, and I look at them, and I may spend 10 minutes usually, kind of going through the reports, looking at just the rent rolls and income statements and any maintenance issues that may have come up, which are typically minor, and just making sure that everything kind of jives. And that's usually about the extent of it. Now, once in a while, I might get a call, but it's usually once the problem is solved already, and it's like, oh, hey, by the way, just want to give you a heads up. We had a little issue with this tenant, or this, that, or the other. It's already taken care of, but you're going to see a little thing on your statement this month, and so just wanted you to know what that was about. But those are few and far between. So, and my experience with the vacancy and just the tenants in general has been good. I mean, the houses, there's not been a whole lot of turnover. I have several tenants that have been there for, a couple of years. And when there has been turnover, it's usually been a pretty quick turnaround to make the house rent ready and get somebody else back in there. So that's been good.
Fun side note, which we're rolling out now, Andy, which I haven't even let you guys know this yet, but have you heard of Matterport?
It's a new one.
Matterport is a new way to give your viewers like a three-dimensional view of the house. So for every house, every time a property is brought into our portfolio now or becomes vacant and is released, instead of just taking pictures, we're now doing Matterport video, which is three-dimensional video. So it kind of gives you a schematic drawing of the house, which then turns and you can do three-dimensional walking all through the house.
Oh, cool.
Which is super cool, because now we're able to be way more aggressive on pre-leasing properties.
Yeah.
Our dream, it's definitely doable in multifamily, because the multifamily model is you've got 150 units in the apartment complex. You've got one that you keep as a model home, or maybe it's the manager's property, and just come in and take a look around. They're all identical, so you can easily just see yourself living there. Single family is very different, because not only are you in different school zones and streets and neighborhoods, and people want to go into the home and get a feel for what it looks like. Well, now Google Maps, obviously with Street View, has allowed you to walk up and down the street digitally, but now we're actually allowing people to walk through the home digitally. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to very much allow us to aggressively pre-lease, and we've actually started to get our properties pre-leased. We've successfully now, and this, in fairness, was actually even pre-Matterport. We've just made a conscious effort to do it, but we're really aggressively pre-leasing our properties so that when our tenants give us 60 days notice, and now all of a sudden, they're allowed to walk through the home digitally and through pictures, and we're getting these things leased out, which is super exciting because it's taking our our time in between tenants from 14 days and driving it down, and we're hopeful
Mm-hmm.
that the ultimate goal is that zero vacancy could be a thing of the future for us. So we're super excited about that.
Get that cleaning crew in there and get them going,
You got it.
right?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I mean, and I think some of the other stuff that I know you guys have done over the years, with like the little key boxes, so that you don't have to have a leasing agent that actually goes to the home with people, and they enter their credit card in, and it charges them $1, and they can go look at the house on their own after work, and I mean, all those things I think are helpful in terms of just being on top of your game on the
You
property
have to be. I
management.
mean, one of the mantras that we live by, and I'd love to hear a mantra that you live by in your office or in your home, but one of ours is automation equals freedom. And we believe that if you can automate tasks, not that you're trying to eliminate personnel or FTEs, but
Mm-hmm.
just simply you're trying to get them working on greater tasks. I like to say that it's easier to do than to think, and it takes a lot more time and effort to think through a problem. And we don't just want to employ doers here, we want to employ thinkers. So if the tasks that are just repeat mundane tasks can be automated, that allows room for our thinkers to go to work and think about creating value for our clientele. What are some mantras or phrases or quotes that you have found inspirational?
Um, well, there's of course the classic "do unto others." I try to embody that in my life and treat other people how I want to be treated, and that kind of goes to core values of integrity and respect and compassion. Um, and then one that I like to say sometimes, I had a job when I was in dental school. I had a part-time job sweeping parking lots with a family friend from church. He had a parking lot sweeping business. He had this big machine that he would drive around the parking lot. And so my job was to go with him to the Cracker Barrel parking lots and a few other places, and I'd sweep the corners where the machine couldn't get to. So it's my
Yeah.
job to sweep out the corners. And we do this usually once or twice a week, but it was a late night job. It was like we didn't get started till 10:30. And Mr. Sam, who owned the business, would come pick me up, and I'd go streets sweeping parking lots. And every night when he'd come back and drop me off at my house, I'd get out of the car and he'd roll the window down and he'd say, "Andy," he caught me with this every week. I don't know why I didn't catch on to it. And I'd turn around and say, "Yeah," he said, "if you get a hold of something you can't handle, turn it loose." So that's another one I try to live by.
Boy, that you can go deep with that one, actually, can't
Yeah,
you?
there's many layers to that. That probably requires a little late night whiskey drinking session.
Love that. I will credit you. You and your wife are the epitome of fun, and I think if anyone ever has received one of your Christmas cards, they will know how fun you love to get. But is that something you have to be intentional about, Andy, is to relax and enjoy life and kind of focus? And do you and Suzanne consciously think about the now rather than just, always trying to plan? Do you enjoy and embrace the moment?
I really try to, and I'm not successful at it all the time. Uh, it's a hard thing, and I think it's gotten harder in the world that we live in, where to quote one of my favorite musicians, Jason Isbell, he says, I fight the urge to live inside my telephone. It's that thing is right there in front of you always, and so it's easy to miss out on stuff. But we are intentional about trying to set aside time in our lives for travel and experiences, both just us as a couple and then with our kids as well. Usually we take at least 2 or 3 weeks worth of vacation, sometimes a little bit more than that. And then we've been fortunate enough to have a place out at the lake near where we live. And so that's become a big part of our life, in being out there and being in the moment with just nature and all the fun that comes with being on the water.
I know you've got 2 young kids. What are you teaching them about money and finance right now? Do you talk to them about what you're doing and how you're doing things differently?
Yeah, actually I do, especially with my son, Kelso. He just turned 11. And so for the last couple of years, that's been an ongoing conversation. He's sort of a math kid anyways. He's kind of interested in numbers and math. And so, teaching him about the concepts of passive income and borrowing money and leverage and a mortgage and paying back the bank, and all of those things are things that we talk about. And it seems like we talk about that stuff in the truck more than anywhere else. If we're riding somewhere, he likes to ask me about it. Sometimes he'll be like, "Hey Dad, did you buy any more rental houses?" And so that usually is a segue into that conversation. And then recently, we went on a trip to Italy, and Kelso went with us. And I found a super sweet deal on some business class plane tickets, which ordinarily I wouldn't spring for that level of splurging for the whole fam. But this is a trip that our daughter wasn't going to go on because she was a little too young. But I found a great deal, and so I talked to David Phelps, actually, our mentor and Freedom Founders, and I said, I don't want to spoil this kid, and so I'm trying to figure out a way to make him earn it. And he said, well, yeah, you just want to have it be like proportional to what he's capable of. And so, he doesn't have to pay for the whole plane ticket. He just has to do enough to to create value for him. And so what we did is in order for Kelso to ride in the front of the plane, and he didn't know I had already bought the ticket, but he had to read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is sort of the seminal
Mhm.
book for many budding real estate and entrepreneurs. And so he and I actually went through that book chapter by chapter together, and read it together. And so that was how he earned his way into riding at the front of the plane.
Well,
So
dude,
that was
love
cool.
that story. Love that story. Do you feel like the schools are kind of facing a tough battle trying to teach our children about finance and money? Do you think they're doing a decent enough job, or do you really just feel like, hey, that just falls back on the parents to really, discuss the difference between, I talked to Jack, and he was, he's 14 now, so we're talking about interest rates, and he suddenly had the realization that, interest rate being high could be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on whether you're the borrower or the lender. And, for a kid at 14 to understand that, if I said, hey, do you want the interest rate to be high? He's like, well, am I the borrower or the lender? That's pretty
Yeah.
profound. I mean, you're not going to get taught that in school.
Right.
What do you think? Are your schools doing a good job? Are you doing private, public, or?
No, we send our kids to public school, and we're fortunate to live in a community where the public schools are excellent. And I'm a product of public school education here in Arkansas. My mom was a public school teacher, and I believe in it. I believe it's an important thing in our country. And hey, they're fighting an uphill battle especially in regards to financial education. And I don't know to what extent that's really their core mission. I think they could probably do a better job of that than is currently being done. But I say all that to say that you know it's going to be an uphill battle when the vast majority of the population, the parents, don't have a fundamental sort of foundation or an entrepreneurial mindset. And so I don't know, I think it's kind of inevitable that that's going to fall onto those of us who do have that bent to try to pass that on to our kids and influence other kids that we're around as positively as we can. But I'm all in favor of public schools, especially fortunately in our area where they're excellent. I want my kids being a part of our community, and I don't want them isolated in a private school. And I don't say this to be down on private schools, but I want my kids to be around other kids that aren't like them, that don't come from the same level of affluence or background, because I think that's an important thing for them to learn, how to exist in a multicultural and uh, diverse world.
Have they been bullied at all, or are they realizing that they come from a wealthy family? Have they been triggered there at all yet?
Not from that angle. I mean, I think there's been a few little run-ins with punk kids, but I mean that's just, I think, comes to the territory probably of any school.
I got
But
the memo one day, just as an example. My son was like, I think and we didn't do a deep dive on it, so I just kind of let him. I'm like, that's fine. Kind of like, I think you and I are similar. We got the sports guy, and we also drive a truck, right? So he just one day he's like, Dad, can we just not take the Audi? And I'm like,
yeah,
I think he just, it might have been a bad day. He might have got hassled. He
yeah,
might know that,
yeah,
where he's going, there's going to be some people that are judging.
yeah,
And he's a great kid, very positive mindset kid. But when he tells me that, I listen, right? So sometimes you just have to, let them
sure,
take that and run with it, and not ask questions too much. But because
yeah,
normally he's
and
super
there's
positive and proud of what we've been able to do as a
sure,
family.
yeah, and there's balance there too, and trying to teach your kids of, like, it's okay to be successful, and it's okay to you know, to have nice things and build wealth. And you can also be humble and kind, and it doesn't have to be a showy, flashy thing. And so, there's a fine line to walk there, and it's hard to teach kids because my kids are growing up in a little different sort of socioeconomic uh, level, I suppose, than I did. I mean, I didn't grow up poor or anything, but my mom was a school teacher, my dad's a preacher, a retired pastor, and so we had enough. But we didn't take trips to Italy when I was a kid. So how do you give your kids those experiences, but yet also not ruin them in the process?
Yep.
And that's the challenge. That's the whole challenge.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned a little while ago about leverage and debt.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about how you've grown your portfolio. Are you a guy that pays all cash for your assets? Do you like to leverage them and try and scale? For the audience out there, talk a little bit about what your theory is behind leverage, that balance between, obviously you want them to cash flow as much as possible, but you also want to build up the asset column. How have you been able to juggle that line and through debt?
Yeah. I'm a leverage guy. Conservative and quote unquote safe to the extent that it can be. I mean, I think any of us who borrow money and use leverage understand that it can lever in either direction, and so you have to be guarded and smart about it. But looking at my situation, I'm in my early 40s, and fortunate enough to be in a job situation where I have a high income, but had not yet accumulated a ton of net worth outside of traditional retirement plans. And so, looking to get to a goal of replacing my living expenses with passive income as quickly as possible, was kind of facing a situation where leverage is going to let that happen faster. And so for me, it's a speed to goal thing. And then in our asset class of single family homes, we have the ability to borrow against them, probably more easily than many other asset classes, because it's a known commodity. The banks can see it. They know what they're dealing with. There's comps in the area. They know what it's worth, and so they're comfortable lending. And so, yeah, it's been a part of me building my portfolio, and I think it probably will continue to be. And there's all these, you can go down rabbit holes in the real estate world of different strategies, but I mean, my basic strategy has been to lever up and then snowball down. And so, trying to get to some critical mass of doors, homes in the asset column that are producing, adequate cash flow, and then using those cash flows now while I don't really need them because I'm still producing active income in my job to, pay down those assets with the goal of eventually being out of debt and having free and clear real estate that may be something that I never part with, and pass on to my kids.
Do you think you'll retire a little bit more sooner than your than some other of your compatriots or
Well, I hope so.
practitioners that are, huh?
I said, well, I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah, other people that are in your same profession. I mean, what is a typical? I mean, and maybe it's dentists in general. I mean, a lot of them work into their 60s, don't they?
yeah. I mean, I think dentists kind of have a reputation for being guys that are somewhat tied to the chair, is the phrase that we use, where it's easy to have your lifestyle creep kind of come in and just spend what you earn, and next thing you know, you turn around and you're 59 and your kids have just finished college, and you're like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to retire anytime soon. And so I just wanted to be intentional about not being in that position. And as far as whether or not I will retire or stop practicing, I doubt that will happen anytime soon. Just mainly because I've spent a lot of time and effort getting good at being a surgeon, and I feel like I'm, sort of in that time in my career where my physical abilities to do it and my experience level and skill level is I'm doing providing a level of care that I am really proud of right now. And so I don't know that I want to just stop doing that because I feel like it's a valuable thing that I do for people. But what I could definitely see is having the passive income kind of shift how I do it in terms of how much getting a little bit more balance in my life with the amount of time I get to take off and, the pace at which I work. And so those are areas that I'm actively sort of exploring, as once I get to some sort of critical mass. And within our mastermind context, we have some ways to evaluate that in terms of the freedom number and things that you figure out, how much you actually need, how much is enough. That's a big
Yep.
question to answer. But yeah, I could see myself hopefully here in the next few years scaling back and doing this at a reduced pace. And I think I'd get some more enjoyment out of it in that way, for sure.
So if you could talk to your younger self, or go back and do things a little bit differently, or maybe just accelerate your financial learning curve when it comes to investing, what would you do differently? Or let's just say that there's someone who's out there now that's 30 years old, just got out of dental school and
Yeah.
is in practice. What do they do to try and get in your shoes and accelerate that learning curve quicker? I mean, we're always, as I know, you're a giver and you're wanting to educate and you're wanting to help people. What would you do to help that person?
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back, I mean, I think, you know, you do the best that you can with what you know at the time. And so hindsight's always 2020. Um, but if I had to go back and change things, I think, I was going down the traditional financial pathway, financial model, the accumulation theory. I was plugging away at the office 401k and sticking as much into that as I could every year and building up that nest egg. And if you're not doing anything, then that's probably the right thing to do. But I wish I would have been able to discover or shift my mindset away from that more towards alternative investing and the accumulation of cash flow producing assets. Because at the end of the day, that's what can change your life in the short term. My retirement funds and my IRA and my 401k, that's great, but I can't really touch that until I'm 59 and a half. And I'm 41 now. And so that's a long runway for that money to make a difference in how I enjoy my life in the short term. And so that's a mindset shift that I wish I could have clicked on earlier in my professional practice life, because I think if I'd have come around to that cash flow mindset earlier, I'd probably be in a different position than I am right now. If still kind of on the hamster wheel, still trying to get to that point, and I'd be a lot closer to it if not already there. So it's just a mindset shift towards, accumulating assets that produce cash flow, and that cash flow in turn replaces your living expenses. And once you have enough assets to replace your living expenses, then you're financially free. And at that point, a whole world of opportunity and choice opens up to you in terms of what gives you the most highest degree of satisfaction and how you can make the greatest impact in the lives of the people that you care about. And so, that's what I would tell somebody who is starting out is, hey, don't be afraid to step outside of what the masses are doing. All your buddies are going with the traditional financial planners, and those guys are well-intentioned and I think are helpful to a lot of people. But the pathway to financial freedom is not going to be found through doing what everybody else does. I mean, that should be sort of obvious, but it's not. But, the masses are not quitting their jobs or taking off on adventures when they're 40. The masses in the professional world are grinding away in their practices and, are really tied to it. And so if you do what everybody else does, you're going to get similar types of results. And so I wish I could have discovered that a little sooner.
I was fortunate that, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad at a very young age. And although I didn't, intend to make it my vocation, it was just going to kind of be a wealth accumulation tool of buying assets. Luck would have it. God's plan for me was to jump feet first. I wasn't smart enough to be a surgeon, so I'm just a lowly real estate.
Don't sell yourself short there, Mark.
Hey,
you might could have done. You could have been an orthodontist. You pass out if you see blood.
I do.
So you would have had to go orthodontic route for sure.
Hey, mate, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it. This was your first podcast, is that right?
Yeah, first time.
Dude.
I got the headset, so I'm all set. So anybody else wants to interview me out there, I'm ready to go.
Oh, mate, you're just living the dream. Great family, great guy, good friend of mine, and I really appreciate our friendship.
Yeah, me too.
And thank you for coming on today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Look forward to seeing you soon, man.
Thanks, mate.
You're listening to Mistake-Free Real Estate Radio, the authority in passive real estate investing. No late-night calls, no clogged drains, no tenant nightmares. Take the passive investor's approach to real estate investing and trust a turnkey professional. Learn more at mistakefreerealestate.com. Until next time, remember, you don't get rich from what you earn, you get rich from what you own.